the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. Clint, how are you?
I'm good.
It is a beautiful morning. It's currently 4:59 a.m. We have the window open up here in my office and the crickets are going and it's still dark outside. I'm just waiting for the owls.
I know. It has a nice chill to it out there this morning, and it's going to be a good day.
You know, something that I've been noticing in not only clients, but even people that you and I are close with is sometimes I see a lot of people who emotionally shut down, even in good seasons of their life. So I thought that we can kind of break things down a little bit and maybe develop some strategies, especially when it's due to chronic stress.
Yeah, I think it's easier to shut down, not only having that emotional response, but because you start seeing like the physical reactions to it too. But emotionally, when we start having more and more stress, that it's easier to separate ourselves from that situation than actually dealing with whatever's going on.
Something really interesting that not a lot of people touch on is when things seem to be going fine, or maybe there was a trauma. You know, yourself or a particular individual has dealt with the trauma before, and then things have fizzled down and there's no stressor that's immediate in somebody's life. And yet a lot of the times it's during that element of downtime that we see some of that emotional shutdown.
Yeah, I think it's a new routine type thing that we get so used to holding on to that stress. We're going through that incident on a regular basis, whatever it is, and then all of a sudden when whatever gets straightened out and you're like, well, I don't have this anymore. You're always looking for that next instance or that next negative stressor that's going to be affecting you.
Something I've seen is how emotional shutdown is actually not always tied to a specific call or a specific crisis or trauma. I've seen a lot of the times where it starts to develop gradually because of chronic stress, sometimes emotional containment, even nervous system adaptation. And I see the individual functioning, they're showing up and they're doing what they need to do, but internally, a lot of the times their emotional range might feel like it's muted.
And I think that's where, like, I see this with my partners on a regular basis, the officers that work with me or under me, and you start seeing them go down this rabbit hole of they start separating themselves from that uncomfortable position that they're in, and you see their emotional response in the beginning, in the early stages. It's a higher, they're more passionate about whatever it is. And then over time, when it's not dealt with, you see them kind of just like, well, it is what it is. And you just keep moving forward from it. And it's easier to just shut it down than to actually deal with it.
The psychological concept here is actually emotional numbing because of chronic stress. And a lot of the times this happens when the nervous system basically starts to dampen emotional intensity. And it does that to maintain stability under prolonged stress. And of course, this is super protective in high demand environments, but this kind of adaptation can actually extend into your everyday life, and it reduces access to both difficult and positive emotions.
And I think, especially being in the first responder realm, like we're told so often, don't show emotion, don't show happiness or sadness or stress or anything like that. And we start, like, we're literally, it's ingrained in us from the very beginning to turn off any emotion or human response towards any given situation, whether it's a very tragic, severe incident or just a normal day-to-day kind of call for service.
I think for some people, this can be feeling detached from experiences or conversations. We know what that's like when you kind of zone out a little bit. Difficulty accessing joy or sadness or excitement. And a lot of people have told me that it feels like they're just operating on autopilot.
Something that just came to me as I'm sitting here thinking about it is you're watching a movie and you're not, say it's a funny movie and you're not laughing and you're just kind of just watching it. It's using it as an entertainment purpose, or you're watching a sad movie and something that, traditionally you would be like, man, that's very sad. And you would have that emotional response to it, whether it's crying, whether it's just like, oh, I feel bad for them. I mean, we were just watching a movie recently of the guardianship of elderly people and how it takes over people's lives. And it's such a tragic type thing with our laws, but you're so emotionally disconnected from it. You're not able to have any response to it because you just kind of shut down and you're just like going through the motions of watching it.
One example of this that I haven't really heard anybody expand on, and I would venture to guess that we've all experienced this before, I certainly have, is when conversations start to feel very effortful, like you're having to really exhaust your energy to put in the effort to have that conversation. And a lot of times connection requires a lot more of your energy.
And with as I'm going through that, I think through a lot of the stuff that we've gone through in not only our relationship, but our lives, of always trying to learn something new, trying to push forward, to figure out the different, aspects of life in general and how we can keep moving forward. It's, presencing has been something that's been especially big for me, to where living in that moment and not living in my head and being able to just take each moment by moment on a regular basis.
Something else that I've seen is a lot of the times you'll have relatives or friends and they start calling you distant. And of course you care deeply, but they're noticing a shift in your behavior and you might feel a little bit more neutral than anything else. And I think it's because that emotional range actually feels super narrowed. So it's hard to be able to experience anything else.
Yeah, my mom tells me all the time, she's like, oh, that this job has changed you. You're a different person. Well, I start looking at it as a whole as, well, it hasn't, in general, growing up has changed me. Inevitably, I think all of us go through changes throughout our life of, I'm not going to be the same person that I was when I was 6, 7 years old. And we're going to go through these changes. Some changes are great. Some changes are not so good. It's being able to look at those changes and know, every response that we have towards any given situation, it's okay to have the cause and effect with them, but we're changing who we are based off of our lived experience.
Something else maybe to expand on with your mom, and even as you listen to this, something to be able to use is we can normalize numbing as protection. And what I mean by that is our baseline is probably significantly different than somebody that doesn't have that constant exposure to the trauma dumps or the shared trauma, the vicarious trauma and things like that. And so your system has learned to adapt to be able to cope. And somebody who thankfully hasn't had to experience that, they're not going to be able to actualize it and understand it in the same way.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think, especially with her too, it's funny, and she always brings up this change when I have a disagreement with her, and it's when I give her pushback that goes against her narrative.
But playing on both sides here, I think too that you can reduce pressure to feel more immediately. So what I mean by that is, let's say that she shared something sensitive and perhaps she felt that you should have had more of an emotional engagement because of what she told you. And she's pointing out hey, dude, you should have felt something here. That's information. And so awareness is going to be able to precede change. And that might be information for you to be able to use and to reflect on. well, how did she feel about it in comparison to how she was expressing that I didn't?
Yeah, no, and it's really great. That's really great to think of, as putting ourselves in other people's shoes to have a true understanding of the totality of the circumstances.
And I think too, when we realize that there's a lot of body-based regulation that we can do. I was having a conversation with somebody and we were just talking about the element of just being desensitized that takes place, and just some ways to be able to reconnect with your emotions by reconnecting with what's going on in your body. There's a lot of somatic practices, right? Like you're feeling dull. Let's say that's your descriptive word. And I were to ask, okay, well, what's the biggest part inside of your body or outside of your body that feels dull? Why did you choose that area? And like start digging into those questions. And it's not necessarily something that you have to do with somebody else, but to just start to engage your body to see, like, am I storing something here that maybe I can work on a little bit?
Yeah, and I think having asking yourself those questions or having someone help ask those questions, being able to bring it to the forefront of your mind is super important.
I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below, and as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.